Bond 2016 website. And I do want to mention that we have so far this spring held a total of 16 bond meetings, informational meetings, with our last big feeder pattern meeting happening in the Berkner area at Yale Elementary on Thursday evening at 6:30. So we are very excited about this and just want the community to know that anybody is welcome at those meetings. We will have Spanish translation available. So if you haven't been able to make one of the meetings yet but would like to see the information live for yourself, you are welcome to do that. So without further ado, I would direct your attention up to the big screen, and I'll take you on a quick show and tell of the bond website. So Ms. Hayes, if you'll click on resources, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things there in the top bar. Okay, so here we have a couple of things I'd like to just quickly show you if you want to click on the FAQs. We have updated these throughout the fall and now this spring, and we'll continue to do so as we get questions either at meetings or as they come in. We just keep feeding that information onto our website. So if you'll click back, I just want to show them one more thing in resources. Okay, so if you will click on summary and detail sheets, third one down, there you go. Okay, this is a sheet that should look pretty familiar to everyone. It's been shown by Mr. Road throughout this process, and just wanted to note to everyone that it is available. And Sandra, if you scroll down a few pages, you'll see there are some detail sheets behind that, publicly available for people who may want a more granular view of what is proposed. So with that, we will click to projects by campus. There you go. If you will go to Pierce High School in the left drop-down menu, just want to show you, okay, and scroll down. So you have a comparison list there of things that were taken care of through Bond 2011, and you can also see a list of items that are proposed for Bond 2016. That was a very popular feature from the last bond election that was carried over by popular request. Additionally, if you have a campus website that you like to visit, Yale Elementary or any of the other 54 campuses, you will see a PDF downloadable flyer with specific improvements that are proposed as part of Bond 2016. If you'll click back to the main page. Thank you. Our video is right there, front and center, and then we do have some summary information as well as information about how to find voting locations that are convenient in terms of early voting and then actual voting day of May the 7th. Some other pertinent information to consider about voting, and then some summary information there as well. Do you all have any questions?
Really great, Kara. Good job.
Well, thank you on behalf of the team.
Madam President, welcome first of all. But I'm going to have a moment of personal privilege for a second.
Yes, you may.
I just want to say that the amount of time and energy that this collective senior administration team has put into being engaged and involved in these meetings, between their other duties across the district and these bond meetings. I know it's 3 nights this week. It was 4 nights last week. It was 4 nights the week before. It's just an incredible set of commitment and responsibility and weight that you're carrying back, being here every day, all day long, doing your day jobs, doing this in addition to that, in spite of your house getting frankly blown away, the other things that have happened across the district. And I just want you to know on behalf of the board and our community, we thank you so much for all that you put into it. I don't know how you're still standing and doing your jobs every day, all day long, considering how much time and energy and the 15 and 16-hour days, day after day.
Thank you, Mrs. Greenhall. And that is a great segue to our next item on the agenda, which is an information item about the bond planning and student enrollment growth update. Since our last meeting, we've had several bond information presentations, and we've also had the Lake Highlands Enrollment Growth Reflective Committee has also met. So at this time, we're going to ask Dr. Stone to please give us an update.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Caston, and welcome home. I do have an update tonight to bring to you as the facilitator, the person who led the Lake Highlands Reflector Committee. Several people around the Horse community did attend each one of the meetings, and I've also asked them to join me at different times to share different information about the committee. Tonight, I'm going to kind of frame my comments about the update from the process of the committee around 4 central topics. One would be just to open with some celebrations that I'd like to share. I want to give an overview of the committee's work, the 6 meetings that we had beginning back on March 1st, an outcome of the committee's work, and what the committee ended up with last Tuesday night in terms of what they charged me to bring forward to you tonight. And then we'll talk about some next steps and a timeline. So, around the topic of celebrations, this was a great opportunity to work with the entire Richardson ISD community. Primarily, the largest portion of that was with the Lake Highlands community, and I really want to talk about the commitment of this community. We started out with 48 members. There were different amounts of people that were there at each one of the meetings, but by and large, they all attended the meetings very consistently, and the level of commitment that was displayed, the level of passion that this community has for our schools and for the district and for the students was evident, and it was great to experience that along with them. The work of the committee, they worked, again, 6 weeks, and it's not just attending, a meeting, showing up and attending a meeting for 2 hours and then going home. I mean, they had homework to do each time. They worked on their own in groups, lots of conversation. It was a big show of work on the part of this committee, and I think that you're going to hear that we're really proud of the work that the committee did. The trust that was built on the part of the committee and the community, I can't say enough about. We started out, establishing this group. We all came together as just individuals, and I think by the end of it that we established a real level of collaboration and trust that was evident in every single one of the meetings, and it just grew, and it felt really good, and by the end of the meeting, everyone was commenting about that, and that they hoped that that level of trust would continue, and that working together as a community would continue. The process that we went through, I'll take you through in just a few minutes, but I think that you'll see that it worked. And it's evident by the fact that at the last bullet there is my final celebration, that we do have a path forward, that we can now go from the work of the committee and we bring it to you, and now we can move forward with their recommendation. And that is nice to be in this place. So to start out in terms of the next talking point, which was about the work of the committee, I want to just let you know that everything was centered around our vision. We're all students learn, grow, and succeed. And if you attended, a couple of you were not able to attend. Several of you were at several of the meetings. You know that we put a chair in the center of the room in each one of the meetings, and the focus was that that chair represented all students. And so every meeting that was there, and it was to remind everyone about our district vision, and our work is centered around all students learning, growing, and succeeding. So I want to just take you through just an update. This was the roadmap that each week that we met, it would come up and we would show where we were, and then we would show and talk about the work that we've done and where we're going. So I just want to kind of walk you through each one of the meetings just pretty quickly and let you know how we got from the beginning to the end. On March 1st, as you might recall, we all came together, and the message of that meeting was everything is on the table. Everything that anyone wants to bring to the committee for consideration, bring it. And so at that meeting, we started out with 14 different options. And I thought it might be helpful for me just to review for you what those options were when we started. We had on the list to build a new K-6 campus, to build a new K-6 magnet campus, to build a 6th grade school, 6th grade center, to build a 5th and 6th grade campus, add 6th grade to all junior highs, build a new junior high with a 6th grade added, add on to existing campuses that as a standalone option just to add on, utilize portables, We talked about different grade configurations. Create a 5th and 6th grade center and a 7th and 8th grade center out of the current junior highs. Add magnet offerings to existing campus. Add 5th and 6th grade to existing junior highs and call them middle schools. Add 6th grade to junior highs only in Lake Highlands. And lease space for short-term basis rather than permanent construction. So at that first meeting, all of those ideas were on the table, and so we had a lot of work to do, and I was a little bit nervous that that was going to take some time to get that narrowed down. But as we continued onto the second meeting, March 15th, we really began to synthesize the pros and cons. And the way that we did that was over spring break, every one of the committee members did a big homework assignment where they themselves analyzed the pros and cons of each one of those options and really just came to the table with what they wanted to add in terms of that. So we came to the meeting March 15th and we did a synthesis of activity where all of the members worked together to do a kind of a presentation gallery walk. And at the end of that meeting we took a vote, and at the end of that meeting we were at 9 options. When we moved into March 22nd, we continued to work, research, brainstorm, and we put the groups, members in groups where they worked together on presentations that they brought together on March 29th. And in between that time, they worked and brought some of the greatest presentations. They really worked so hard, and they came together on March 29th, made those presentations that allowed by the end of that night for us to be narrowed down to where we were at 4 different options. So we went from 14 to 4 by the time we got to those meetings. On April 5th, we had a deep discussion about those options, and on April 12th, even deeper discussions about those options. So I wanted to just take you through that roadmap. So for those of you that didn't know how we got from 14 to ultimately 4, which then was narrowed down to 2 options that were standalone options and 2 options that are secondary or supplemental options that I will show you here in just a second. So that was the process of the work. Any questions about that part? You all have worked and walked along with us all, and so this is not a lot of new information. But just as a reminder, this was something that the board charged us with all along the way to keep in terms of our guiding factors, to keep in mind at all times the instructional implications, the neighborhood schools concept, to maintain diverse represented demographics, fiscal responsibility, effective operations, safety and security, and to come up with a solution that would provide for future flexibility. Lots of conversation throughout the process. These were constantly cycling back into questions about are these guiding factors being maintained in the options that we're discussing. So I want to talk about then the outcome of the committee's work. You can see how we did get to narrow down to where we were at 2 options that I'm going to talk to you about tonight, and then some other supplemental considerations. And I want to stop here and I want to just tell you how important it is for me to convey the work of the committee. I'm not here to share what I think or what I want, or I'm here to convey as openly and honestly as I can what the committee wants me to share. And the others around the horseshoe who attended I want you to hold me accountable to that. Toward the end, I'm going to ask if there's anything that you think that needs to be said, so I want you to keep that in mind. So 2 options, and we've talked about this, but I want to remind you that they are option 1, to build a new K-6 elementary school, and option 2, that the committee felt strongly about keeping on the table, is to build 2 5th and 6th grade campuses on the current sites of Lake Highlands Junior High and Forest Meadow Junior High. So those 2 options are the options that the committee brought forward to you in terms of recommendation. And I clipped this out of off the website that shows that at the end of the last meeting, we had the committee members to do a vote and to choose the option that they felt best served as the long-term solution. And you can see the percentages there on the screen. And what I said to the committee at the very beginning at the meeting, and then at the end of the meeting, is that this is not, we're not going to have winners and losers. And this is not going to be at the end of the day, if we don't land on one decision, this is not that we have winners or losers, or we have two sides, or that we have a committee divided. What I'm going to convey to the Board of Trustees is that the committee felt strongly about these two options. And so they felt strongly enough that they wanted these two options to move forward. So when I talked about that path forward, I'm talking about the fact that the committee wanted us to bring to you that these two options are two options that they felt strongly about. And you can see those percentages. So I'm going to talk then a little bit just to give you some information about how the committee felt about these two options. The first one being build a new K-6 elementary school. And I'm going to frame that in terms of some of the potential advantages and disadvantages that they see to these solutions. So to this solution, first of all, is some potential advantages. They felt that the new K-6 elementary school was obviously consistent with the current model of our ISD, you know that we have K-6 schools. It supports the neighborhood schools, that students attend school for 7 years without a transition. And I will tell you that there wasn't a whole lot of talk about the advantages of the K-6 elementary school in terms of specific points, because other than that they like our K-6 elementary schools. That was kind of everybody gets that. We like that. Everybody, ideally, that everyone likes that one. And so, but there were some potential disadvantages to this solution, and we're going to have a little more discussion about this slide. Because I know that the committee would want us to have some conversation about this slide, because this really was most of the conversation about this idea. So potential disadvantages were that available land is limited and may not be an ideal location. So we're going to talk to you tonight about location, because I will tell you they talked about location, location, location. And then the second big point that was constantly surfacing around this idea was that it would require a change of attendance boundaries, and obviously some concerns. So if this was the solution that the board ultimately went with, these are two potential concerns that I know that the committee would want us to have some conversation about. So I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to ask, first of all, Mr. Harker to just give an update, first of all, on that available land, and just the whole idea about the parcel of land that we've purchased, and then what other available sites that there are for us to build a new elementary school. Mr. Harker.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. If you remember, last year we had a market study done for the area that we were having the highest amount of growth in Lake Highlands specifically, and that's a corridor that really runs just immediately to the east of Skillman, and running from all the way from our southern border up through to about Skyview. It's really the White Rock attendance area. That's the kind of the epicenter of where we've had the highest amount of enrollment growth. And so we focused on that particular area for our first round of property reviews, and we actually were able to acquire a property. None of those were ideal, by the way. Each one of the properties that we looked at had pros and cons with them. Some were larger, some were smaller, but as far as trying to get within that particular zone, we actually had the opportunity that Mr. Bono brought to our attention about a property that we thought was under contract, that deal had fallen through, and we were able to move fairly quickly on that, and that's the Lake Highlands Office Center at White Rock Trail and Walnut Hill. So available land is very limited unless you're going to eminent domain property. There's simply not a lot that's for sale that would be a better location. We did consider property within the Lake Highlands Town Center, but there are parcels that are divided by the creek and by the thoroughfare there that make each of those parcels either equal to or smaller, or about the same size as the property we ended up buying. Price, the biggest concern we had there was the proximity to the DART station and the amount of both foot traffic and vehicular traffic that was coming through that area, and our ability to be able to secure it was a concern there. So as far as land that we currently have available to be able to build on, certainly would be the 4.6 acres, 4.57 acres we own at Walnut Hill and White Rock Trail. And then plus, what the committee discussed is the ability, we have sufficient land located at both Lake Highlands Junior High property that we already own and Forest Meadow Junior High property that we already own that would be large enough to be able to build a campus on.
And then if you will talk to us about some of the things that you shared about the impact on attendance boundaries.
One of the charges, and several committee members reminded us repeatedly about that the committee was not charged with determining what the change in attendance boundaries would include. I think there were many that really wanted to discuss that. I mean, because that's really the question is, if you're going to vote for that, a lot of it would depend on what impact on attendance boundaries. They wanted to know that. Where would the school be located? How impactful would those attendance boundary changes be? But they kept coming back to the charge was to determine the option to address and not so much the how it would be implemented. The committee at our last meeting, we discussed everything from, one of the committee members had thrown a proposal out to the entire group that involved changing attendance boundaries for 5 elementary schools, I believe, Dr. Stone?
Yes, sir.
Within the Lake Highlands Junior High, and actually bleeding over a little bit into Merriman Park.
Yes.
Would be the only one that would be outside the Lake Highlands Junior High attendance area that would be affected, but 5 campuses would be affected by the change. The committee had questions about, how many campuses could be impacted or would be impacted. So we discussed other options with them, that it could be that you impact just a single campus if you build an elementary school. And so we discussed how would that work? How could you just touch one? And so we used the example of, since the growth is concentrated at White Rock Elementary, you could just simply build a school within that attendance boundary and split that attendance boundary, or look at having an intermediate or a primary grade option and affect just the single attendance boundary as an option. And then we looked at everything going up to affecting 2. The next highest growth is Wallace. And so what could you do? How could you configure that where you could affect just those 2 areas without affecting all of the other attendance boundaries in the area? So we talked about that, and then all the way up through the 5 that was submitted by one of the members. So there are lots of options for you to consider. And we did discuss the fact that the administration of the board has been very sensitive to this, and we've tried to avoid wholesale changes coming in and putting a new school in the middle and redrawing all the boundaries just to make it fit. That's not been our intent. So I hope that covers the items that you want to.
And we'll go back and talk about this. I'll go on and I'll talk about the other options, and then we're going to have time to answer all of your questions. Option 2 was to build the 2 5th and 6th grade campuses on the current sites of Lake Highlands Junior High and Forest Meadows Junior High. And so here's some potential advantages to this option. Obviously, a big one was it wouldn't require attendance changes. The existing attendance boundaries to change. You wouldn't have to buy new land because you'd be building them on the junior high sites, and it would reduce enrollment of every elementary school in the feeder pattern. So those were some of the advantages the committee came up with. And then some potential disadvantages to this solution. It would be a departure from the K-6 model, which we can talk about. It would create an additional transition for students, eliminate leadership opportunities for the 5th and 6th graders, could result in some underutilized elementary schools. it could have an impact on accountability, and larger peer group setting at an earlier age was a concern for the community members who were parents in particular. So those were some of the potential disadvantages to the solution, and we can talk to you about any questions that you might have about that in just a minute. So some supplemental options just to add into the equation that the committee wanted to bring forward would be that we could still build on to existing campuses as needed. The committee did not want us to end the conversation about potentially transforming one of our schools in Lake Highlands into a magnet campus, and the one in particular that they would, I'm sure would want me to bring forward because it was the topic of all of the conversation, was North Lake Elementary, whose principal's in the back of the room. Hello, Mary. And then the last supplemental option or consideration that we took a vote on, this was unanimous in support, that they would utilize portables, but only on a temporary basis. It wasn't that we want to just start adding portables to all the campuses to address enrollment growth and move on. So those were other supplemental options. So I did want to point out, though, that each week, we did put the meeting summaries up, and in particular, I know that many of you read this over the weekend in preparation for this meeting, but you can see on the screen as I scroll through, all of the comments are captured there of every single committee member's individual thoughts about all of these options. How important is that we have this record of every single thought that was captured? And as we move forward in our work, we have this to look back on and reflect on and make sure that every committee member's thoughts were heard. So as I just scroll through you can just see all of those committee members' ideas captured that will move forward as we progress in the planning. So next steps and timeline, I would tell you that I want to take you back to the very first document that I presented back in February. It was February 15th when I first proposed working and putting this committee together. And at that meeting, you can see, this was the screenshot from that meeting. I talked about surveying the Lake Highlands community then, and wasn't sure when in the process that it would be a good time to do that. Originally, I thought that we might survey earlier on, but because we had so many options, it would have just been all over the place instead of in terms of a survey. So we decided early on that we would wait to survey until we really narrowed down an option that we would survey the community about. So here is where we're going with that. We're planning to deploy a survey tomorrow to the entire district that would really have just 5 questions on it. Have had a lot of conversation about this survey. Originally it was really long. It could take a long time for you to answer. We've narrowed it down to where it would look something like this. So I've taken some screenshots of the actual survey. We're going to deploy it from another vehicle, but this is exactly what it's going to sound and look like. But I'm open to your comments and your talk about this. So it would begin just introduction there about what the survey is. Then we would ask the person committing the survey to tell what best describes them, so we can identify, and that will also allow us to disaggregate and break the data down. We'll ask them to best describe the elementary attendance area that they live, work, or their children attend. So we'll be able to get every single, across the entire district, so all the elementary schools that are actually in Lake Highlands, we'll be able to break those down, and then we'll also be able to break them down by the feeder patterns from across the entire district. Then we'll be asking just really 3 questions on top of that. And the first one is about the K-6 elementary school, that if this was the solution that was taken forward and the creation of attendance boundaries for the new school would therefore impact the attendance boundaries of some of the current schools, could they support construction of a K-6 elementary school, or were they unsure, or could they not support construction of the new K-6 elementary school? The next question would be around the 5th and 6th grade centers on the junior high sites, and you can see basically the same question, kind of breaks it down what that would mean, and then could they support it, not sure, or could not support that. And then the last question would just be, let's see where you are on the two options and taking a feel of both of those options. So this would be then the plan. We would deploy that survey, keep the survey open. We're looking, and I want to talk to y'all about the timeline of that in just a second. We looked to come back together and schedule some board work sessions where we will bring all of this together. You'll have time to look at all of the community feedback if you haven't had time to do so. And we're going to just continue to work. And then our goal will be that we will develop a long-term plan and see how many of these options are involved in that. So, let me get to this next question, because I want to make sure, because this was important, because I committed to the committee that I would be the voice of the committee, but I'm not going to sell anything. I'm just going to share with you and tell you where we got to with this committee. So I want to go around, if there's anything that anyone who attended all of the meetings would share. What else would the committee want the board to know that maybe I haven't shared?
I have a couple of,
Okay.
I want to emphasize again that location is the key for the vast majority of the committee members. It is a big concern for them. I think one of the other things to add is, in addition to building a new K-6 school, they also discussed the option of maybe needing more than one school built over the long term. They were wanting to make sure that whatever solution is developed, that it truly does address the problem, that it is long-term, that we still have flexibility down the road. So considering more than one campus being built was definitely part of the issue, part of the discussion. I think there was quite a lot of discussion on diversity and how any solution really helps us embrace the diversity that our district encompasses, and making sure that we keep that in mind, that we all keep that in mind moving forward. And I think ultimately what I would say is everyone was able to share their perspective and their opinion, and even if one person had an alternate opinion, they were able to voice that. The group was very much aware of everyone's perspective on the solutions, on the situation, agree or disagree. It was something that was heard, and I think that's something that the committee also very much valued.
Dr. Stone, I would just like to add two pieces. One, the student voice on the committee was incredibly powerful. Oftentimes it was their insight, their perspective, their wisdom. As sometimes we fail to forget that even at 17 and 18 years old, there's a wisdom that they have in seeing the world from this fresh perspective, that they were often able to push the conversation forward. And they were able to help the adults sometimes get out of the quagmire of whatever that topic was and propel us forward. So I thank Dr. Stone and the board for including our students in the voice, because they really were profound. In addition, I would just like to echo that one of the constant things I heard as the committee was really looking at the 5th and 6th grade options was that they were very strong in their recommendation that if we built it at one junior high, we needed to build it at the other junior high. And that to just build a 5th, 6th grade option, for example, at Forest Meadow, and not have that also at Lake Highlands Junior High is not something that the committee felt like would be in the best interest of students. Would be, if you think about our instructional implications, and we look at those, and that would be something that they would not be in support of. The last thing I said too, I lied, it's one more. The instructional implications that you gave to the committee were critical in helping us really calibrate what those things meant and how important each of those played in the decision. So we had long conversations about truly what is a neighborhood school concept, and why we came in potentially with 38, 40 different definitions we left with, and whether or not we necessarily agreed and we liked the definition, but we left with a common definition to allow that to inform the decisions and the recommendations that we made. So I thought that was really critical to the work.
Mr. Hargrove, do you have anything that you would say would be a critical takeaway?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about it on available land and location and impact on attendance boundaries. Those were recurring themes. I mean, just to echo what Dr. Goodson and Dr. Brandon mentioned on that would be all I think I would have to add.
Okay. So I know you have a lot of questions, and so we're going to open this up now for us to just have comments and talk about these options.
Okay, so Dr. Stone, going back, first of all, thank you for the presentation and the organization of this. This has given us a great roadmap to work tonight. As far as debriefing the conversation tonight, would you like to start with the two options and allow an opportunity for board members to comment or ask questions about each one as a standalone?
Sure, that would be a great idea. So let's start and frame the conversation moving forward first about the new K-6 option. What questions that you might have about the advantages, disadvantages, or anything further that you would want us to find out as we move into the next phase of our work.
Okay, so board members, let me just say this up front. This is a work session for us, so it's more conversational than it is formal. So I'm going to just open up the mic for y'all and feel free to ask questions and make comments or observations as they come to mind.
I've got some questions, and so we're talking K-6 right now, but some of my questions are contrasting the options. So
Okay.
One of the things I would like to know, and we can either talk about it tonight or I know we're trying to schedule a meeting for next week, is just so the notion of building a K-6 school at one of the junior highs, it doesn't seem as though either of those locations would be ideal in terms of affecting the area where we're having the most trouble. Is that an accurate assessment? For a K-6 school, I'm talking.
Well, the Lake Highlands Junior High, I mean, it would be within the Lake Highlands Junior High feeder patterns where we're having, the highest amount of growth. So if you build it on the Lake Highlands Junior High campus, no, it's not ideal because it's not, you're going to have to alter.
You'd have to shift effectively.
You would.
Right. A lot of districts between there and White Rock.
A lot of attendance areas between
Right.
there and White Rock, yes.
I wanted to clarify that because that was my thought when I heard that notion. I may have seen these numbers, but I couldn't recall them offhand. But construction costs, just generally speaking, for a K-6 versus what's being contemplated for a 5-6. And I guess in this case, it would be 2 5-6s. So construction costs for that option versus, I guess for now, just one K-6 school.
Of course, just to build the building. And I'm going to give you range because, it's like how much does a car cost? Depends what kind of car you want. Somewhere between, the figure we use with the committee is somewhere between $23 and $26 million for a K-6 or like campus, like that. When they talked about the notion of a 5th and 6th grade center, they discussed whether that would be constructed using a secondary delivery model or an elementary delivery model. And the cost to do that on using an elementary delivery model would basically be the same as building a K-6 school. So when we say K-6, I mean, it can be whatever grade configurations within K-6 that you want. It could be 5th, 6, it could be K-6, it could be K2, K3, whatever. As long as it's that elementary model, it's still going to be in that $23 to $26 million range per site, and that excludes land. If you were to go with a secondary model, that number jumps to, I believe it was between $46 and $50 million per site if you use a secondary delivery model there. And the reason for the premium is you're going to build the athletic facilities, the fine art facilities, all of those things, the science labs. You're gonna build it like you're building a junior high.
I guess that kind of for me, brings up a question of how do we, we're trying to get, there's lots of moving pieces here. We're trying to eliminate as many variables as possible. So when it comes to something like that, where you're talking about 5, 6, and secondary elementary model, is that something that the administration is going to recommend if you did build it? This is the model we would use, or because I'm just trying to figure out how do we make this decision. So we have to get to some set of assumptions here to be able to make that decision. So can you talk a little bit about how, I guess it's a broader question about how we get to a decision on this. So.
Well, it's going to be, obviously, and I know that Mr. Bonham has said this a number of times, if this were an easy decision, we would know what we were going to do a long time ago. It would have appeared, it would have, built itself to us, obviously, already. I think we're going to have to go and get around the table and to look at locations and implications and see what we want to do in terms of boundary changes and what it will mean for cost and what it's going to mean for some of these other, we're going to have to just weigh out both of these options in terms of looking at which one that the board feels is the best option for the entire district. And I think that's just going to have to be with more of an in-depth conversation, looking at accountability of data, looking at numbers, looking at costs, looking at all of those things, and really ultimately landing on a decision.
Right. But I think, so there's a lot of those kinds of questions that I have and that I'm sure you have too, about what's best instructionally. That's the number one thing, right? But then what are the construction costs? What are the ongoing operating costs for the 5-6 model versus the K-6 model? I realize we can't answer all those tonight, but those are some of the top of mind things that I have in terms of how we approach this. Last question I have, and then I'll yield. I've got some more, but I don't want to hog the mic. But you talked a little bit about impacts on accountability. Can you just talk a little bit more about that so that we understand what we're talking about there?
So the impact on accountability is such that if we were to pull out 5th and 6th grade and have them as separate campuses, the 5th and 6th grade campuses would be fine. Those 5th and 6th grade campuses in terms of accountability would just be fine. Because typically, traditionally, historically, our 5th and 6th grade scores really pull up our elementary school campuses for a number of reasons. One being that 5th graders have a second attempt to take the reading and math portions of the test. It's the SSI initiative, or Student Success Initiative, that the state allows all 5th graders that do not pass to have a second attempt. And so by the time that those 5th graders have taken that second attempt, those scores are really, really high. That brings up the campus in terms of when you're looking at all students passing for Index 1. So that is one reason. So the 5th and 6th grade campuses would be fine. The 3rd and 4th grade campuses would be a big concern. We've looked at some of the campuses in Lake Highlands, and some of our campuses would be a big concern if you pulled out the 5th and 6th grade scores. And so we do have some big concerns, and we do have to look at that because, and our principals look at that, we had a lot of conversations about that. So one of the things that I would like to do as we move forward into the next work session is to take last year's accountability data and run some reports to see how those campuses in Lake Highlands would have fared last year if they didn't have their 5th and 6th grade scores factored into their accountability ratings. So that would be one thing we would look at. I don't know if y'all have other comments that you would make, but that's my first attempt at that answer.
Dr. Stone, would you just clarify that? And then, so the way that a school would be responsible to the state academically, or I'm not sure that's how you say it, but is determined by us when we create that site. So if we actually create a 5th and 6th grade center, then we are designating that as a campus that would be rated separately.
That's correct.
So there's not a way, for example, to rate them together somehow?
No.
Okay.
They would have their own individual principal, their own PEMS number. They would be an individual campus. Yeah.
I had one question I just wanted to build off of Mr. Oliver's is the difference between the elementary model and the secondary model. Is there an instructional difference as well?
And there was a lot of conversation about that. I'm going to kick that to Dr. Goodson and talk about how, when we talked about both of those in terms of whether or not the 5th and 6th grade would be more toward the secondary, junior high, or elementary. You want to talk some about the conversation?
Sure. The committee, I think, we had little breakout sessions where Brenda and I kind of facilitated a conversation regarding the 5th and 6th grade center. And then part of that discussion revolved around, okay, if there was a secondary model, then we would, the students would have different types of opportunities. And I think their thinking was going toward the elective part of the schedule. By talking about an elementary schedule, they liked the fact that you had a homeroom teacher. At most, you may switch 1 or 2 times in a departmentalized situation where you have a reading, language, arts teacher, math, science, and possibly another content area. The committee members that we heard from had mixed emotions about both. I don't know if there was one definitive perspective on which one they thought was better. I think for every opinion that shared, okay, I want my child to have that extended elementary experience. I want them to stay connected with their learning in a different way. I want them to have that homeroom setting. I don't want to go to that secondary model just yet. We also heard from parents that said, you know what, they're going to have to experience a transition anyway. They're resilient. If it provides different opportunities for them earlier, why not give that a shot as well? I think for the purposes of our conversation, we focused on it being an elementary instructional model, just so that they could kind of wrap their thinking around it. So I think ultimately, it just depends on the person who is sharing their opinion, very different perspectives.
And if I could add to that, because I did have the opportunity to go and observe one of the meetings, to add on to what Tabitha had shared earlier about the student voice, the students were unequivocal about the fact that they did not want to have a secondary model if it moved to a 5th and 6th grade. They absolutely felt like it was way more beneficial to stick with an elementary school model. And on top of that, I don't know where they ended up in the last meeting because I wasn't able to attend that one, but they didn't actually think 5th and 6th was a very good idea. And that was coming from our students. And one of our students had actually gone to school in another district where he left our elementary school model and went to a 5th, 6th model and came back to our ISD for 6th grade because he did not like it. It was not a fit for him. So just to put that into the information flow as we're considering this, if we really want to honor that student voice, that's what I heard loud and clear. I don't know, Jean, Justin, you guys were there as well. As long as we're doing some comparisons, we talk about the difference in construction costs between the two models. Can we talk about the difference between the maintenance and operation costs of operating, if there is a significant difference of operating those two facilities? Mr. Harper, I'm looking at you.
I knew you were. I was trying to. I mean, yes, there is a significant operating cost differential. You have a more efficient delivery model with an elementary model than you do a secondary, simply because they teach 6 to 7 periods as opposed to 5 to 7. So that alone creates a fairly significant differential. If you go with the secondary model, you're going to create the master schedule. You do it at the elementary level, but it's not the same, where you have 7 courses and you choose from that, and then you create some inefficiencies with that as opposed to a secondary model of 22-1, or for 5th and 6th grade we use 28-1. That's a more efficient delivery model. I'm not trying to say it's better academically, it is more efficient. So yes, there is a differential in the operational costs. It will be higher on the secondary model as opposed to elementary. I can't tell you exactly what that would be, but at this point, we can calculate that out, and it will be fairly significant.
Well, I know when we went through the process of realigning the high schools and moving the 9th graders to the high school model, that helped us from an efficiency standpoint with classes that were offered in both environments, that to teachers at health and some of the electives and things that we had to offer in the junior high model versus we had to offer also at the high school. Is there any difference, is there any relationship to that in that if in a 5th and 6th grade model we would have some duplication of things that we were offering in that versus things that we offer in the junior high model that's not very efficient, that we have to have teachers doing some of the same types of things.
Really, about the only one that comes to mind has to do with fine arts. Because what will happen right now for band, orchestra, I'm not sure for choir as much, but certainly for band and orchestra, what happens is the directors have to travel to each of the elementary schools within their respective feeder patterns, so it is a less efficient model than if you had all of those students at a single location. You would create some efficiencies there and be able to actually reduce staff at the fine arts side. But that, I think, would be one of the few examples where you would have courses that go down into the elementary ranks that you're going to create an efficiency with.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was just, I know one of the, we're comparing these two, but in terms of location, I know it was a big emphasis for the committee. And I know the status of the land at White Rock Trail and Walnut Hill, is that final? I mean, we own that property?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And just so I have a good understanding, the parcel that you mentioned earlier, that was closest to the DART station, when we talked about that at a different time, there were some issues, I believe, with ingress and egress. Not just cost, but it was getting students in and out of that particular parcel. Am I remembering correctly?
Well, it has a, the traffic flow would be better because you've got the east-west egress would take you out to Skillman. And it would, but now you'd only be able to go north when you exit. The north-south egress from that parcel, which I think that is Wildcat Way, that takes you down to Walnut Hill, and it has a controlled access there. So both ways dump out onto a 6-lane, 4 to 6 lane controlled access road. But as far as pulling parents away from the school quicker, you have a longer queue to be able to do that. So from that standpoint, it would be a stronger location. The concern we have is you don't really get, the parcel we bought is 4.57 acres. The parcel at Lake Collins Town Center was 4.61 acres. So you really don't gain any meaningful space there. In some respects, it actually, the topography on that land, I know a lot of people are concerned about the Lake Highlands Office Center land being on a hill. That actually could be used to our advantage compared to the flat parcel in the town center, building into the hill. But the biggest concern there was we didn't gain anything on size at all. And you trade having the queue coming out onto White Rock Trail, which is a 2-lane road, you trade that for close proximity to the DART station. And when we reviewed that property on multiple times, there's a considerable amount of foot traffic there from the DART, and that would be a concern. So securing the property and securing the students there there was a concern for us.
I believe there's a sizable parking area for the DART station as well.
There is.
So, okay. I think that's all I have at this time. Like Mr. Oliver, I don't want to hog the mic, but I do have other questions. So when we get to those points, I will chime in.
If I recall, when I was in the last meeting, do you have the raw numbers of that kind of community survey between the two? As I recall, that's like 21 to 18 or something like that, right? Am I remembering those raw numbers correctly? So, I mean, can you, Dr. Stone, kind of characterize where the community left that as they left the meeting? I mean, obviously it's, you know, if this was a presidential election, it looks like a landslide, but I think it begs to be provided a little more detail on kind of where the head of the community was at, say, if they left it.
Yes, and I'll let anyone else who was in the room weigh in. I mean, I can't stress enough that I think a lot of people would vote for the K-6 school if they knew where it was going to be located. And there's just a lot of concern about the location. So I think because of that fear and concern, a lot of people talked about going with the 5th and 6th grade center because it felt safer, because there is such a concern about us changing attendance boundaries and dividing up the Lake Highlands community. I think that, you know, I can't overstate that that's just how they really feel. So that was something that really was just very pervasive in the room. Share other people, you want to share other things that you would say about how this collectively you think that the group was feeling?
I think you stated it perfectly. I think it's not a landslide by any stretch. I think so many of the members are uncomfortable with the ambiguity of the location, and it concerns them greatly, and I think we would be understating it if we didn't say it exactly that way. They really, they know where the 5th and 6th grade centers would be, and I think for some that was a deciding factor, and that's what caused them to vote the way they did.
Okay. And Mr. Hart wrote a couple things for you. I know when in some of the meetings we had, obviously for them to consider building 5 and 6 centers, you guys had done an assessment to determine that they would actually fit on that property. So my question is really, how does that impact both of those properties relative to current parking, tennis courts, football fields, soccer fields, tracks, et cetera, and what does the revised footprint roughly look like with both of those items there?
We just talked in terms of, is there appropriate land, is there enough land there? So you have about, I want to say it's just under 5 acres that would be available at the Lake Highlands Junior High site, but now that would involve displacing the current tennis courts, but it would not impact the track or any other aspect to the building. But there's that much raw, just open land on the, that would be the east side of the building. Forest Meadow, more options, there's a little more green space there. The issue there would be trying to be able to provide entrance egress to it. So have a fairly long queue, trying to pull it to the front. It would have to front Abrams. There would be about the only way that would work. And so I think there's actually a little bit more green space at Forest Meadow that would be available for us. But the first one would be Lake Highlands Junior High for sure. If you were staging them, I know the community indicated an expression of wanting to do 2, but they also talked about phasing that in. So the first round would be Lake Highlands Junior High, because that's where you're having the highest concentration of growth and the most campuses that are impacted. And then consider Forest Meadow either at the end of this bond and bridging over into this next bond would be an option, or completely in the second bond, in the next bond.
Okay, and then I guess my next question is a comment on land, which I think we basically told the community, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that obviously we're continuing to keep options open. We obviously own a piece of property, and we've looked at how things might work in the junior highs, but obviously we're still beating the streets and looking for other opportunities that might be a better fit. So
we are.
Okay. And then Dr. Stone, I guess, is it fair to say, I mean, as I looked at the K through 6 part of the presentation, and then go into the 5, 6. Is it fair to say that while they're not listed as positives, some of the negatives relative to a 5, 6, i.e., accountability, departure from K6 model, leadership opportunity, loss of leadership. So some of those things that are listed as negatives there should also be considered positive. K6 and how did that discussion go with
I think that would certainly be a fair way to look at that, because those were some of the things that when they're comparing the 5th and 6th grade, they're comparing them to the K6 campus. And so that would be what they would lose from the moving away from the K6 campus. So I think that would be obvious that would be a fair statement.
And I guess obviously I know boundaries and land locations have driven a lot of angst, if you will, on making this decision, but I'd just like to hear from you guys just academically. We heard in those meetings a lot of, snippets about vertical alignment and number of transitions, but then there were some comments from, a 5th grade teacher who talked about, well, it'd be kind of interesting if I had 3 other science teachers on my campus, whereas right now I'm the only science teacher, so I have to collaborate with a teacher at, another school across town. So I think there's a lot of different academic considerations, and I don't know how we can kind of consolidate those as to which one is the right thing to do for kids, but at the end of the day, I know that's the number one thing I'm making a decision on, so I'm trying. I appreciate some feedback from you guys on your perspective relative to that.
Let's just start. I can tell you that, I from my former district, Wiley, we had 5th and 6th grade campuses at all. That was the model. We went K4 and then 5th, 6th, 7, 8, 9, 12. So that was all the experience I've had for the last 4 years, and it worked really well. You can't compare Wiley to Richardson in terms of a lot of the challenges that we have in terms of some of our campuses, and so it's difficult to say. I would say that one of the conversations that we had at the committee was whatever model that the board ultimately decided that we would go with, if it was to go with 5th and 6th grade centers, that we would have the best 5th and 6th grade centers at Lake Highlands Junior High and Forest Meadows Junior High that you've ever seen. So we would have to do a lot of shifting in terms of support and those kinds of things. And so, that's sort of how I feel about it. And, I'm going to be honest right now that I feel a little bit uncomfortable, only because I was so neutral, I think, whenever I was leading the committee, and I was staying in this neutral role where I wanted to just lead the committee and I didn't want to sway. But once given the opportunity to share some of my true feelings, I want to be able to share them about the instructional implications, because I am the leader of that role in the district. But so, Chris, Dr. Goodson, you want to share some?
I think ultimately what we realize is the direction that we go, it's incumbent upon us as a district, as the educators, to make sure that it does work for the children and that it does work for the teachers. And I think, going back to what Dr. Stone said, we didn't want anyone to feel as though there wasn't an option, that there was an option that was taken off the table without an extensive amount of conversation. And I think they know that we have to continue to study. I think the committee also knows that our job is to organize the resources, to organize the training, to provide those vertical alignment opportunities. The teachers, as we did the rotations during that last meeting, did talk about, well, what other opportunities are out there? I think I would have an opportunity to, or it would help me to plan with 5 other 5th grade science teachers, because right now I'm the only one at my campus, just like you said. With the K6, the way that we have it right now, that's an opportunity that many of our teachers don't have, because they departmentalize in different ways depending on the campus where they work. It's hard to say which one is the absolute best model right now, because I think there's more to it than just picking one model. I think one of the other parts that came up during the conversation is that, based on a lot of the research, one of the better models is a K8 model. That was another part of the conversation that came up. So are we narrowing our scope with just the 5-6 Again, every option was discussed, every option was on the table, whether it was someone else's perspective on the research or, trying to be sure that we heard everyone over the course of those meetings.
Dr. Stone, if I just may add that another perspective in terms of the voice around the room is that we did have the other 3 feeder patterns represented. And the feedback that they shared is that it's important to think about this in terms of a district-wide implication and the message that sends to the other 3 feeder patterns. And if truly, as a leadership team, we identify that there are the merits of moving to a 5-6 are so strong, that then does that imply that we need to have that conversation across the other 3 feeder patterns? And I think and Dr. Stone, forgive me, I am going to share a little bit of my personal feelings about that. The sentiment in the room and where I landed was that yes, there are some benefits of the 5th, 6th. And I think the conversation allowed us to identify what those are and for us to be intentional about how do we build those into K-6. But the implications were not strong enough in favor of a 5-6 that it would mean we would change the instructional model across the whole district. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So yes, there's merit in that model, and yes, positive things for kids and teachers can happen. I don't feel like it was at such an overwhelming level that would imply that we would need to change the grade configurations across the entire district. Because I do think, yes, Lake Highlands is a unique community with a unique identity, and we need to meet the needs of that. We are our ISD as well. And so that was just another perspective I wanted to share. It's good.
All right, thank you for that perspective. I probably have some follow-up questions, but I'll yield for a while. Thanks.
Well, and I thought we were going to be more interactive anyway, so please step in. But
Okay, then I'll go.
Yeah, except for Chris. And I'm not even sure exactly how to ask this question, but talking about, because we were starting off just talking about the K-6 model, and what I also heard was, yeah, we love our K-6 schools. Where's it going to be? And Justin started talking about, asked Tony some questions about locations, etc. So I guess I want to talk a little bit about, do we think there's other opportunities other than what we've got already identified? And, have we gone down the path of really stretching to figure out, been creative or whatever the right word is for that, for locations? Because, I feel that way, if K-6 is the way to go, and I keep going back and forth myself, to be honest with you, but it really does depend a lot in that area. In Lake Highlands, it depends on the location, because we're trying to identify, we've got schools that are breaking out of the bounds in different parts of the area and they're redrawing the boundaries, and you want to try to limit that. So is there any way that you can give a little more flavor on maybe stretch opportunities for that?
Stretch.
Well, we can go outside that immediate area. We tried to pick the zone that we shared with the board back in about 8 months ago, 7 months ago, whenever we first started talking about that, was, again, it went from the southern tip of White Rock Elementary attendance boundary to just west of Skillman, and then going, really following the Lake Highland or White Rock Elementary attendance boundary on the east side, going north, and then stretching into the southern portion of North Lake attendance boundary. So it did cross over into Merriman Park's boundary just slightly. There was a little bit of a crossover with Lake Highlands Elementary, a little bit with North Lake, but it's predominantly the zone we were targeting was White Rock Elementary School, because that's where the highest concentration of growth is. So within that zone, we continue to look at the property. We looked at everything that was available, unless you're wanting to eminent domain property, which we I'm not sure we have ever done that, and certainly not within the last 25 years. And that creates a whole other set of issues for us if we do that. There's not a better location.
Okay, I appreciate that.
We could go outside that zone and we could find, property that would, I think one of the challenges that was raised about the White Rock Trail was that it was a 2-lane road, and so you had entrance egress was off of a 2-lane road, and then the 2-lane road, about 15 yards after the property boundary on the north, it ran into a controlled access for Walnut Hill. And so if that was the major concern, one of the things that we brought up in committee and that we discussed with the board is we have 6, 10 schools already that have a very similar configuration. The example we used in committee was Heights Elementary School. It's right across the street from our meeting. Heights Elementary primary entrance egress is onto Floyd Road, which is a 2-lane road. When you exit Heights, their queue, you are 10 feet from Beltline Road, controlled access, 6-lane road. There is very little difference between those two locations as far as the type of road that they feed onto and what they intersect with. Really, the major difference is that Floyd has a sidewalk on both sides of the street and White Rock Trail does not. It's only on one side of the street. It's not on the eastern side of the street. And that's certainly something that we would be willing to visit with the city about and grant an easement on that property to create additional footpath there. That's really the biggest difference. And I can give you example after example after example of existing schools that have the queue feed onto a 2-lane road. And Floyd Road is a major thoroughfare. There is significant traffic north-south on Floyd Road, as any of you that are familiar with that area can attest to, that would rival the traffic off of White Rock Trail. So that's a great example of it. You've got North Lake Elementary School. The queue for North Lake is on Ravensway, and it immediately junctions with Church, which is at least a 4-lane road at that point and doesn't even have controlled access at Ravensway and Church. You've got, there's just a number of them. Take almost any campus and look at where they are. Short of White Rock Elementary, which is embedded in the middle of a neighborhood surrounded by single-family homes and no major street, no major thoroughfare immediately around it, the majority of our schools actually have, or a significant number of our schools actually have close proximity to a major thoroughfare. That seemed to be the biggest issue with the property. We talked a little bit about the slope of it, but one issue with a K-6 school you have to be sensitive to is K-2 have to be able to egress the building without having to negotiate a stairwell. And so that property on that hill creates an opportunity for us to actually build into the property or build into the hill. So you could have egress off the second floor that could come straight out onto grass and be able to accommodate more going vertical with the space. There's ways to address the traffic. We looked at all those things before we made the offer on the property. So we do think it is a viable location. It just looks different than what most of our elementary schools would look like from a space standpoint. They have sprawl with them. We have everything's surface. Most of them are 1-story. Parking is surface space. All that, you'd have to look at it very differently in that particular piece of property. So there's the stretch in my mind. So certainly we can look at other properties. There's not anything else for sale within that zone. We're talking to other owners that have property that's not for sale currently, but I don't know that it would improve that circumstance. So unless you're willing to go out of that zone and then have the requisite change in attendance boundaries that would come to that would be the stretch.
Tony, along that same line, Mr. Harper Road. Will you comment about the discussion that ensued about possibly on the Lake Highlands High School footprint for the elementary school?
Yes, an option that was presented to the board was the notion of some type of a land swap with the city of Dallas, where they would make available parkland on the south side of Church and their proposal was to move our athletic facilities off of the Lake Highlands High School campus across Church, and then build an elementary campus on the Lake Highlands, on the north side of Church, on the existing Lake Highlands High School campus where current athletic facilities are located. So that's an option that was presented to us. What that would do, that has a number of issues associated with it, and certainly we weren't trying to speak for the board, but we just raised questions about that. What you would then do is you'll have thousands of kids going back and forth across Church multiple times a day to be able to do that. We have a significant investment in the athletic facilities that are on the north side of Church on the Lake Highlands High School property. What we would then be also doing is creating a situation very similar to what we have at Richardson High, with West Junior High located on the same property, and creating, that's been that way ever since West was built. If we could go back in time and undo that, I think certainly we would rather have that land just for Richardson High by itself, because now we're presented with challenges there because of being landlocked. You'll create similar types of challenges at Lake Highlands High School by building another campus on that property. There were concerns raised at the Reflector Committee meeting about, and from community members since then, about traffic and what you would do with the traffic along Church Road by throwing an elementary school into that mix, and then close proximity to the high school for some of those younger students. So yes, that is an option. But I certainly see where that would solve some issues for the city of Dallas, but I'm not sure that solves issues for Richardson ISD.
So that leads into another one of my questions on the 5-6 centers on the junior high campuses, and does that get us into that same situation of then becoming landlocked with those junior highs?
Well, it does. It does. I mean, we could do it, and a 5th, 6th grade center is doable there. We talked about the notion of a K-6 site in the same location, and while we indicated that was possible, it's more problematic because you need a little more green. You need some more green space if you're going to have K-6 there as opposed to 5th, 6th. But yes, it would then limit you for junior high future growth there.
And I have one other question, because I know Mr. Bruno is just dying over there. So we have, you talked a couple times, and somehow I missed this because I attended several of the Reflector meetings, but the committee was very adamant about if we build 5th, 6th centers, that we would have to have 2 of them. Can you explain a little bit of that to me? Because I know one of the concerns about building a 5th, 6th center at Forest Meadow, is the possibility of having several of our campuses be way below our utilization. So I just had a question as to why that immediately went into that. It's got to be 2.
I'm just telling you, I'm concerned at, we're going to do the right thing. You guys are going to do the right thing for kids educationally, regardless of where we end up, and I know that. But as I step back and think about those decisions, it gives me greater concern for frankly, the future of the neighborhood that I live in, because I know what decision I would have made. I would have made the decision to keep my kid in that elementary school environment through 6th grade. And so it concerns me about the future of my neighborhood with that shortening that 2 years and what happens to those elementary schools over time if now people start moving into our other feeders because they have the choice to do so. So that's the thing I'm chewing on and I'm struggling with because I know educationally we can do great things for kids either direction, but to me it's more about the future of a neighborhood and the future of a feeder, and that gives me some pretty significant pause when I think about young families making that decision and really weighing those two options within our district. I know we're going to get the survey. We'll see what the broader community thinks, and we'll continue to work through this. But I'll just say that's one item I'm having a hard time getting past. So.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I have a big concern about that. And part of I come at it from a little bit different take, but same conclusion. I'm very anti-complexity. Unless you've got a really compelling reason to introduce complexity to your model, you shouldn't do it. I think this introduces complexity from a planning, staffing, neighborhood decision perspective. I think it adds complexity. And I think that if something's the right answer for Lake Highlands, it's the right answer for RISD, and vice versa. If it's the wrong answer for RISD, it's the wrong answer for Lake Highlands. They're all kids, they're all families, regardless of the geography of where they live. We talked earlier about the fact that we're approaching things systemically. We have to think systemically. We have to think about what models, what ways of planning and operating give us the most leverage and allow us to have the most repeatable processes and curriculum and things so that we can get the most out of our staff and get the most out of our kids. So the 5th, 6th grade model just gives me a lot of concern for all those reasons. And I guess, the big negative being the location on K6, to some degree, I don't really get. Because, obviously the location is going to be a location that's going to address the problem where the crowding is. So if the concern was that, well, we don't know because we don't know where we're going to build it, that's one thing. That to me doesn't make any sense because we're going to build it in a place to solve the problem. But if you're telling me that you don't like it because you're afraid it's going to affect I get that. I understand that because that's painful. None of us wants to have to go there. That's painful, but it's not because we don't know where it's going to be built. It's going to be built. If you need surgery, you're going to operate on the part of your body that needs the work, right? And the K6 seems a little bit more surgical to me than a 5-6, which seems a little bit more shotgun. It's going to affect a lot of campuses that don't have a capacity problem. They're very happy the way things are going right now. I've heard that from a lot of people in Lake Highlands. It's like, why am I having to send my 5th and 6th graders when we don't have a capacity issue? So, somebody needs to help me to understand, instructionally, to me, the 5-6, the only reason to go that way is if it's, much better instructionally, because it seems as though the primary problem it's trying to solve is keeping the grown-ups happy from an attendance boundary perspective, right? And it does do that, but if we're going to introduce that complexity and go down that path and potentially consider the possibility of doing that as a district, then to me, the only reason I'm going to do that is if it's the best thing instructionally for kids. So that's where I am on it, and I don't know if, I know we're going to have a session next week. I don't know if we're going to, get to that point. If Dr. Stone, if you guys are going to be able to come in with some of that information that'll help us make that decision or not. I mean, I'm certainly willing to commit to making that decision, but what I don't want to do is make it before we're ready. So, I don't know what everybody else thinks, or Ms. Caston, where your thoughts are in terms of the timeline for making that decision. But I agree with what Mr. Bono said at the Lake Highlands meeting, which is that this is a generational decision that we need to not rush into. So we need to make sure that we're comfortable before we do that. So anyway, I said a lot of stuff there, but.
And thank you, that's a perfect segue, because what I keep wanting to say is whatever decisions, whatever solutions we come up with, and I keep wanting to tell the community this, is that I have confidence that we'll make it work. When you talk about that building, I have confidence that you can make that work. If we go to 5-6, I have confidence that our educators can make it work. And I think that's where so much angst comes from is, we know we're going to make it work, and I don't know how to express it, but to tell the parents and community members out there that, I think we do deserve some trust here that we're going to make good decisions, and we're going to make whatever decisions we make work. Thank you.
Just a couple more things that jogged a couple other thoughts. Building on my previous comment, and back to kind of the accountability discussion, I'll be the first one to tell you that I, certainly don't base decisions on test scores on my end, but I am concerned about the optics that, especially as, our legislators are forcing us into this A through F rating system of our schools, and the volatility that could put in the system of, absent this decision, you could have two schools that are both rated A or B that both look and feel the same, and now all of a sudden those two schools that would be rated A or B, one in Richardson is now still rated A or B, and this other one in Lake Highlands could be rated a C or D just because the makeup of their student body has changed. And so, building on my previous point, just is something I'm really, really concerned about as we head into that, kind of head in further into this discussion. And I'll say that because I know, a lot of people are going to, there's people listening tonight and people pick this up on video. I don't say all this to end the conversation at all about how we creatively look at executing whatever option we end up with and thoughtfully consider the transition in getting to where we ultimately get to. Because I think this conversation has also brought up a lot of other questions, right? I mean, we're starting to ask the how big is too big question, and we've got really big schools in Lake Highlands feeder right now, and a lot of them have significantly high populations of economically disadvantaged students. And I think we need to continue to have the discussion about, is a 800 student school the right size for a population with high economically disadvantaged kids, or does that need to look differently? So I think there's a lot more to this than, where are we going to put those couple of hundred extra kids at White Rock that are going to be there over the next several years. There's a lot more to that than there, and what does the future landscape of Lake Highlands look like? And I think regardless of which decision we make, that doesn't change that we need to be really thoughtful about how to transition there over time. And so I want people to understand that this isn't a flip a switch and this this gets done. There's still a lot of thought for how we can execute this and soften the blow on families, if you will. So.
Thank you, Justin, for that. So I'm just going to wrap up with a couple of observations. First of all, Dr. Stone, thank you and your staff for some really authentic sharing your perspectives, sharing what's on your heart, and we really appreciate y'all's doing that. It's very genuine. To board members, you guys had great questions. I appreciated the flow of the questions tonight. You know, you start off with the asking questions for clarification and understanding, and then as we got into it at the end, everybody really shared what was on their heart and what was thinking, and shared that also honestly and authentically. I think what I've heard tonight as board president, if I can wrap things up for us all, is that this decision will be made once we feel like we have, Dr. Stone, all of the information and the data, first of all, that we need to make that instructionally, keeping our children at the center. And then once we feel like we have all the data points and all the information that we need, then we will feel comfortable arriving at a solution that meets the needs for kids today, but also provides for future growth, not only in the Lake Highlands area, but this will be a template for how we continue to address growth in our other 3 attendance zones, because we're seeing great growth. We're located in just in a fantastic place in the Metroplex, and people are going to continue, as I like to say, to beat a path to our door. So we do have a follow-up work session next week where we'll continue to discuss these options. We do need to talk about the survey, but I'm going to ask us if we can take just a quick 5-minute break, okay? And then we'll come back and debrief the survey. Okay, real quick? All right.